Well, hey folks, it's your old pal, King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. Today we're going to get into the third part of our ongoing little mini-series about the dinosaur swamps and the Rifts tabletop role-playing game. We're going to talk about Florida and Cuba. Now, I'm putting these two together because, like, the total volume of material to be found on both of these areas is, like not a terrible amount, and plus also Cuba in particular kind of explains some of the reasons why Florida is as uninhabited as it is. Like the good chunk, about a third of Florida from its southern end is entirely submerged now, and both of its inner and outer coastlines are kind of been nibbled away because the ocean's rising after Atlantis reappears. There's no established human population, either civilized or barbarian mutants. Really about the only DBs that are mentioned, in terms of intelligent DBs that are mentioned to be living in the Florida area, are the Acaisi. They have a large tribe of about 3,000 that live up in the Florida Panhandle. But otherwise, Florida is basically just open wilderness, not like a forest kind of wilderness, but basically like the Everglades have kind of taken over most of the land. Dinosaurs are probably at their thickest there, in large part because northern Florida is where all this dinosaur madness comes from. A series of ley line nexuses that appeared on top of a testing facility of a space company called KLS, which you can kind of think of, it's a private space industry corporation with heavy government contracts. So you can kind of think of KLS as like what Blue Horizon or SpaceX would be another 70 years from now. The ley lines, upon intersecting with the weird technologies they're developing there, basically caused the ley lines to hypercharge, and created the time holes. They still remain active there in northern Florida, and this entire time they're what keeps spitting out all these seemingly primitive, out-of-time kind of animal species that one can find here in the southeastern United States. So that's a good chunk right there as to why you don't exactly find a whole lot of inhabited areas. Plus, also when the cataclysm happened, I mean, there were moments there where Florida was briefly submerged entirely. It's just that the water receded and only a chunk of the south and along the coast stayed underwater. But like lots of stuff got washed away there. Further south in the time holes, you do find Florida's most famous monument, which is the Jungle Castle, which is, like, they don't spell it out, possibly because they don't want to get sued, but it's basically, the Disney fantasy castles somehow survived with chunks of the theme park's underground railway system and storage areas survived out there intact out in the middle of this mucky swamp. There is a small tribe of people called the Claymen, or Tunnel Goblins. It's implied that they might be DBs. They're kind of ugly. They're not terribly powerful or do anything cool. They just kind of basically look like humans with like weird flaky skin, which is why I kind of feel like really they are probably just actually a human mutant tribe that's been living in these tunnels and isolated for so long they've forgotten that they're human. The whole way they're described, even down to like the weird flaky stuff on their skin, reminds me of an episode of Star Trek Enterprise called Terra Nova, where the Enterprise goes to a Earth colony that had some disasters, and so like a whole generation of children had to be hidden underground, and then the adults never came back, and so they basically stayed underground and forgot that they were human and assumed they were a different species, and would paint themselves in mud, which would dry and flake off, and gave them pretty close identical look to the Claymen there. So that's I feel, kind of a natural substitution if you don't quite like the Claymen write-up as it is in book. A bit to the east of the Jungle Castle is the Cape, which is the half-sunk remnants of Cape Canaveral. In the book, there's like just tons of charts as to kind of, what kind of salvage and stuff you might find if the characters get there and are able to explore various, bunkers and other facilities that are just kind of sticking up from the rubble of all these sandbar islands that now line the eastern coast of Florida. And beyond that, that's about it to be found down there, aside from just a bunch of, flat grasslands, Everglade waterways, and dinosaurs. there's a small chance you might maybe be able to find some bayou ursine living in colonies at the very southernmost tip of Florida, but that's entirely optional if you just feel like you have to stick something in there. One of the main reasons why like Florida has not been like settled from the outside, why like none of its coasts have been like taken by pirates and all that kind of stuff, is its proximity to Cuba. Cuba's been shattered into several smaller islands, all of which have also been kind of somewhat raised up from the ocean floor. So instead of having a nice level shoreline, all the islands are basically raised up on top of cliffs. And several of them have been claimed by devils who have a city there called Ciudad de Diablo, which actually is like open commerce point. Pirates and fishermen and other merchant traders can stop there and trade, buy, sell, get supplies, spend the night, all that kind of stuff. Albeit, they're putting themselves very much under the corrupting influence of devils. Even prior to the Minion War, all this is there, so you still kind of want to account for it all. It's just before 109, they didn't quite have the militant footing, and no one really realized that Ciudad de Diablo was actually like the level of threat that it turned out to be. It's based on Diablo Island. The city's kind of built on top of what used to be Havana. And it directly controls two of the surrounding islands, Devil's Harvest and Devil's Shadow. Devil's Shadow doesn't really have anything going on there up until the Minion War part, whereas Devil's Harvest, you kind of have like devils go there to hunt the remaining human surviving population of Cubans in kind of a most dangerous game kind of scenarios. There's also Harpy's Island, which is kind of a devil's island, although it's pretty much entirely uncivilized and is inhabited by both the mortal regular monstrous version of harpies as well as the dire harpies from the devil dimension. There are two other islands. The easternmost two islands of what Cuba has been broken up into are Dreamland and South Quitalan. Dreamland is actually the home base for the Haroon on all of Earth. Haroon are these like kind of weird alien pirate people with 3 eyes. They kind of look like something out of like an early Star Wars movie, kind of stuff you'd see at Jabba's palace in Return of the Jedi kind of shit. But they for being like a scary evil monster race that's allied to the Splugorth, they have some weird interesting character traits in that they're actually rather mystical in nature, and most of their ships are like created in some sort of dream state by their mystics, and that's what the island that they call Dreamland is important for, because that's where their mystics just basically go off to go live like bodhisattvas out sitting around in the forest communing with nature, and then they enter this lucid dream state where they're able to like physically craft these ships for the Haroon to then be able to take off and go around the world. So their primary source of new ships comes from this island. It's covered in mist, all that kind of stuff. And it's the main reason why the Haroon have such a heavy presence along the coastline of Dinosaur Swamp. And then there's also South Quitalan, the easternmost of all the islands. It's a colony of Atlantis inhabited by the Kitani. The Kitani are kind of a hyper-intelligent, very technologically advanced simian species, looking kind of closer to chimpanzees than they would look like hominids kind of a thing, but still in the primate family. They're the source of a large portion of the Splugorth's technological mastery, although you wouldn't quite put them as high up in the hierarchy as like the Kidian power lords or any of that kind of stuff. Also, another chunk of why this whole little area is a bit dangerous for casual merchant travelers, because your only feasible friendly port is run by devils, and then you have two major bases for both Splugorth and Haroon activities going on right there. So one can see that you have merchants coming out of the Gulf of Mexico from like Texas or down through the Mississippi corridor to reach the sea are probably going to be more aiming down and out to get out of the region, and aren't going to really be like hugging the Florida coast at all, because that would cause them to have to just pass through this narrow straits where the Florida Keys used to be, and where they're just one thing after another of just potential imminent dangers coming from the Cuban islands. And yeah, as I say, like all that kind of stuff has kind of prevented people to settle Florida or Georgia from the sea. It's not like you can just sail on up easily, drop your cargo. There's like constant risk of something's going to be interfering with your shipments. and just things that just in general just discourages people from really like exploring the area from that angle. So that kind of helps lock in why Dinosaur Swamp is best to get to, either if you're just going to teleport straight in there to a ley line nexus, or if you're going overland, either coming down the eastern seaboard from Pennsylvania, or coming across west to east at the very bottom of the Gulf Coast out of Alabama, heading east into Georgia. And I guess that's about it for this little video. Like I said, there's not a ton of like, there's no interesting civilizations and intrigue going on. This is just raw wilderness. It's good to understand what's there at Cuba, but it's not exactly like a great place for adventuring for low-level characters. And kind of comes more into focus after the Minion War begins, if you're playing, Rifts set after the year 109. So the next video on this series is I'm going to be talking about some of the free-ranging roaming villains that you can find in the Dinosaur Swamp. Probably talk a little bit about the flora and fauna itself of the region, and start to get into exactly how the Minion War does mix things up for this region in particular. So until then, stay waspinated, leave comments below, hit like and subscribe, and all that good stuff. Have a good one.